Welcome back, guys. Or if you're new here, this is Automotive Anonymous, and that's a 2000 Chevy Impala. This generation of Chevy Impala from 2000 to 2005 is the 8th generation, and it's actually one of the best sleepers in the world. Especially in the front-wheel drive realm. These are exceptionally cool cars. They have a pushrod V6, and for a while, one of these W-body platforms, as they're called, which shares the same platform as the Buick Regal, and the Pontiac Grand Prix of the same era, was the world's fastest front-wheel drive car. A modified twin-turbo version by ZZ Performance back in the early 2000s ran a mid 8-second quarter mile in the 160s. There's a lot of sleeper sedan, Chevy Impalas, and other W bodies all over the world, especially that live on the internet.
Car it is right now. I do like 30. Spinning.
So let's dive right into why I think this is one of the best sleeper sedans to ever be built, especially by General Motors. And if you're new here, this was the first car that I ever owned. But if you're unfamiliar with this platform, let's start from the beginning. The Impala first came out back in 1958, and the first Impala SS trim level actually came out back in 1961. So a few years before the Pontiac GTO, which most people think started the muscle cars. These are really cool. The first 7 generations were all rear-wheel drive, including the last one in the 90s. That was an LT1 powered car, similar to the Chevy Caprice or the LT1 Corvette of the era, the C4. These, at first, might have seemed like a big disappointment, becoming front-wheel drive and being offered only with one of 2 different V6s, either a less desirable 3.4 liter that made about 180 peak horse, or this with the infamous 3800 Series 2 that made 200 peak horse and about 225 peak foot-pound P of the twisty stuff. The Impala honestly probably was one of the least popular W-body cars to modify. At least the Monte Carlo was a coupe version of the Chevy, or the Buick Regal, which had a similar nameplate to the Buick Grand National back in the 80s. But the most popular of the W-body GM siblings was Pontiac, since that was more of the performance division. They also offered the same powertrains, but even with its foundation in 1997, when the first Grand Prix of that generation came out, it offered a GTP, as it was called, which I just assume stands for Grand Touring Performance, which was a supercharged version of this engine. So this 3800 Series 2 is called the L36, and the supercharged configuration is the L67. That made a whopping 240 horse, about 280 foot-pound feet of twisty torque. So honestly, not earth-shaking numbers, but that was just the start of what these engines could do and what people pushed them to do. And if you're wondering why I'm rambling on about how a 200 horsepower Chevy Impala could possibly be a sleeper, well, in 2004 and 2005, these came with an SS trim level, which again had the same L67 and the same power numbers. But there's a lot of modified examples that live on the internet. And in fact, senior year of high school, over Thanksgiving break, when Black Friday came around, I bought a supercharger kit from ZZ Performance for $500 off. So that was a kit for like $1,300 at the time, which was quite the steal for a supercharger, especially when most supercharger kits run 6, 7, 8 grand or more these days. So then over Christmas break, me and my auto tech teacher, who owned a performance shop, spent 2 days supercharging my Chevy Impala, and that's basically where my journey started, being in love with performance. Although I'll be honest, guys, mine only ran for about 7 months before I had to rod knock and I had the engine replaced, and then I basically sold it because I was just kind of done with the car at that point. It had a lot of issues. It was formerly a police detective car. So yeah, it probably spent way more time than it ever should have just idling, the engine wearing out, getting fatigued, and then pushing it with some boost and a few other bolt-ons and a slightly smaller pulley probably didn't help the formula, even though it was tuned well, and it ran really well until it didn't. But there are a lot of people who pushed this platform and built it pretty crazy. If you were to supercharge yours or have a supercharged SS or GTP or any of those like the Regal GS, you could push the supercharged models to in the upper 300 wheel horsepower, maybe 360 to 380 is about the max that I've ever seen. Which has been good enough to run a low 12-second quarter mile, in some cases with some sticky front tires into the high 11s. But that's basically where the turbo kits start, and ZZP, the W Body Store, and a bunch of other platforms really specialized in these sleeper GM cars that no one else knew about. The worst possible turbocharged Impala you could get probably started at about 300 wheel horsepower, and I remember videos from 10 years ago pushing 600 wheel horsepower, running 10-second flat quarter miles, and otherwise looking bone stock. And then what's super exciting is even in the last couple years, people are now rear-wheel drive swapping or rear-wheel drive converting these with an LS engine, sometimes an LS turbo, you know, a truck transmission or whatever you want to spend. The budget is up to you. And then installing a drive shaft down the exhaust tunnel, there's a lot of ingenuity, a lot of creativeness. So I'm now seeing rear-wheel drive Impalas, Monte Carlos, Grand Prix, and I think those of you doing it, and those of you who I've kind of shared some of your footage, I think is fantastic. I hope that you don't stop building your car, and I hope it's been inspiring to other people like it has to me. It's been over 10 years since I've sold my Chevy Impala, and there's been a lot of times that I thought buying a nice SS, maybe a 2005, the last year of this body style, and doing it up better and bigger than I ever did in high school, when I ever did before it blew up, I thought that that would be pretty cool. But now that there's real drive conversions that have come out in literally just the last 3 to 5 years, if I were to ever build one of these again, you know, the sky's the limit whether you go high 300 wheel horsepower supercharged model, which is about what it can handle before it's too heat soaked, which was the problem of the L67 is they do put out a lot of heat, or you do a turbo configuration and push it to an easy 4, 5, 6 wheel 100 horsepower, or you want a real drive conversion that's either naturally aspirated or boosted running in, you know, the 9s or beyond. Really, the sky is the limit. And not very many people expect to see one of these blow past them doing Tesla Model S Plaid speeds at the racetrack. And I've driven a Plaid, I've driven the 1,000 horsepower electric car, and in fact, it was one of the first vehicles I ever drove on my channel just over a year ago when I started it. And that's insane to imagine that this car, probably with a proper suspension, wheel, tire, everything set up to be safe, could run similar speeds to that. Especially when this one right now, with traction control on, does this for 0 to 60. And bone stock 0 to 60, density altitude's 4,300 feet, so this one's down on power at least 12%, slight brake rev. Let's go. A little bit of wheel spin. First gear sure revs out at about 45. Second gear slows down with the power level though. True 0 to 60 came in at 10.35. Ow, that is painful. Here's that graph. I'll be honest, I know that was quite sad and I was quite disappointed. I was expecting at least in the mid-9s, but I haven't driven one of these since I sold mine. I haven't driven another 8th gen Impala, and although it does feel very familiar, after driving everything I've driven since then, yeah, bone stock, these were not very quick, but I will say back in high school, my naturally aspirated 3.8 liter, like what this is, was fast enough, or I should say most powerful enough to out-dyno my buddy's 99 Mustang with the same 3.8 liter, but Ford's version of it, which was not as good of an engine as this 3800 Series 2. That's a pushrod V6. And for those of you looking to buy an L36 car to boost, to build your own, it's pretty easy. The front exhaust manifold is right there. The rear is on the backside. ZZP makes turbo kits as simple as just unbolting and rebolting their new, basically, header exhaust manifold. Plops the turbo right there in that cross-off pipe. The intake goes through it, the exhaust goes out the bottom and the back, and basically anyone with basic mechanical knowledge, as long as you torque things to spec and do things the right way, you could install your own turbo right there. Pretty easy on a front-wheel drive car. Or to change out to a supercharger, the L67 conversion, you just change out the top intake manifold, the bottom lower intake manifold, do the spark plugs, the fuel injectors, all those basic things, and it's really a pretty easy platform to start building. But otherwise, seriously, just look at how simple this vehicle is for being 20 years old. All of your reservoirs are right up top, your transmission fluid, power steering, all the things, your fuel rails, your spark plug wires, you can just follow them from where they start and where they lead. The valve covers, the oil dipstick, the alternators right up top, and even the serpentine belt has a decent amount of room to change it, unlike a lot of even more cramped vehicles. But this being a pushrod V6, even if you want to cam it, a nice big deep lobe, you can do so many freaking things to this platform. It's pretty impressive. And then sitting inside here, you have basically the Silverado steering wheel at the 6 o'clock position, which I appreciate. This one has heated seats. You have a CD player and a cassette player. So whether you want to plug in your own tunes through the aux port on your phone, if you still have one, or just play around with the dual climate control, the huge storage compartments, you can even smoke in one of these. There's a lot of options. And then this is a 4-speed 4T65E. The supercharged trim levels have the 4T65E HD that had a slightly stronger input shaft and a few basic updates. But the transmission is the weak point in these cars, unfortunately. Thankfully, there are some companies still around, like Triple Edge Performance, that can build you a stronger transmission. And you can control your own lower gears. So if you are turboed, building boost, or whatever you're doing, you have a little bit more control over this car than some of the other modern cars. But it's huge inside. It's really nice. You have the probably fake wood trim, but for 24 years old, yeah, you could clean that up just a little bit more. But overall, this is a super clean example. It has 113,000 miles, which, funny enough, that's basically exactly what mine had back when I owned it in high school. And then $4,900 for this example. Not too bad, especially with how well it looks like it's been taken care of. And the back seats are huge, just like the trunk. Also, if any of you guys are interested, you can buy this one at Twin Falls Chevy. They're a really cool dealership to work with, and I'll link this one below. But otherwise, this has been a really fun experience for me. It's kind of like a passion project, this video. I don't know how many of you guys will watch or how many of you guys will appreciate this, but I love this car. I love this platform, and maybe someday I'll build another one. Heck, these have even had color-matched taillight inserts and been jokingly like the American GTR just because of the 4 taillights. I know that's a silly reference, but for those of you who like this platform, you really like this platform. The next generation Impala wasn't my favorite. I've driven a Monte Carlo SS. There's a video of that you guys seem to really like. And with the LS4, the front-wheel drive V8, the 5.3, that's a pretty cool car. But these 6-cylinders had so much more potential than most other front-wheel drive 6-cylinders that have ever existed. And if anyone's wondering why the check engine light is on, that is just catalytic converter related, which if you buy this car, you're probably going to be swapping out your pipes pretty soon anyways, so that's really nothing to worry about. But this has been such a fun experience for me, and if you guys have had at least 17% the enjoyment that I've had driving this and reminiscing about this platform, I think you probably are going to have a good time, because I know I've had a really good time. But I think it's time for me to drop this back off at the dealership. If you guys enjoyed this video, please consider liking this video. If you learned anything, comment that below, or share your experiences with the front-wheel drive 3800 series engines. These were in a lot of cars, and they were ran for a lot of years. And they're one of the best engines ever built, at least according to Ward's top 10 engine list from back in the day. And it's one that I have a lot of fun getting to show for you guys. So with that said, I wish you the best. Subscribe if you haven't already. Like this video, and take care. See ya.